The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. This is program number 955. Coming to you on Monday, the 2nd of December, 2019. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic, Deeds of Gift. But before getting into the topic, a few preliminary comments. Firstly, my deepest condolences go out to all families which have suffered recent bereavements. And in that connection, the family of my brother, Patches Knights, Calypsonian of note, who apparently lost two brothers on one day last week. Brother Patches, stay up, be strong. And then the DeSantos family of Park Hill, Mr. Evans DeSantos died, and I want to send deepest condolences to his brother, Mr. Cornelius DeSantos, and his sister, Mrs. Isula Sherman, and her daughter, Zinzia Sherman, and all the members of the family. Who knows it, feels it. May the Lord give you strength to cope with your bereavements. And that's it for preliminaries. I want to get into the topic, Deeds of Gift. A familiar topic, familiar concept, although persons are not aware of some aspects of that subject matter, hence the reason I'm doing it again this evening. A deed of gift refers to a transaction involving land or property which is given by one person or entity to another. The most usual transaction by deeds of gift would be gifts of property or land from parents to children. Now, as usual, when I use the word property, I include in it land. And if I say land, I include land with buildings on it. In the 1990s, the government decided, the government of Mr. Sir James Mitchell, decided to remove the stamp duty, which was then 6%, from certain categories of deeds of gift. Parents and children, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, grandparents to grandchildren, and so on. But in recent times, the categories have been restricted so that there are really only two categories now of persons who can register deeds of gift without having to pay the 10% stamp duty. There's parents and children, or husbands and wives. If a grandparent wants to give property to a grandchild, they have to pay the 10% stamp duty, but not if a parent wants to give property to his or her child. If a husband wants to give property to a wife or vice versa, wife to husband, they do not pay the 10% stamp duty. Other persons pay. Now this 10% can be sizable when you're speaking of property that is expensive. So that anything over $80,000 to pay stamp duty on that, you're talking about $8,000 and up. And we have to be thankful to the government to continue to extend that concession to family members. When Mr. Mitchell brought in that policy, he used the phrase transforming St. Vincent into a landowning democracy. And he used the concept of the waiver of stamp duty as a means of encouraging family members to give property to one another. Over the years, we have seen the benefits of that policy, and it is to the credit of the existing government that they have continued the policy, albeit that they have narrowed the categories. That's the general picture. But there are some things which you probably don't know. And if you listen to this program until I have reached the end of it, you probably would learn a thing or two that you do not presently know. First thing, when a deed is presented to the registry for registration, and it says on the deed, this is a deed of gift from parent to child, the person presenting the deed for registration has to present proof of the relationship of parent and the child in respect of the names on the deed. You can't just take a deed to the courthouse and say, oh, this is from Christopher Columbus to David Columbus, father and son. You have to present proof of the connection between Christopher Columbus and little David Columbus. I'm just using these fictitious names. If you can't present that evidence, the deed will not be registered for the waiver of stamp duty. In other words, the deed will be registered, but you would have to pay 10% of the value of the property referred to on the deed. Now, where a child is born into wedlock and his father and mother's name are on his birth certificate, no problem. Because he presents his birth certificate at the registry, and if his name is David Columbus, you will see his father's name. If it is Christopher Columbus, and his mother Mary Columbus, no problem. But suppose the son was born to a woman who was not married to the father at the time of birth, so that the son's birth certificate at the registry only has on the mother's name. You can present that birth certificate to the registry if the father is giving property to that son, because the officials there would say, where is the father's name on this birth certificate? How do we know that X person whose name is on the deed giving the property to a purported son Y is the real father of Y? So what do you do in that case? Before you take the deed to be registered, you make sure that the father's name is inscribed on the birth certificate of the son, or could be a daughter, so that the person who is receiving the property has a birth certificate showing the name of the person giving the property to him or her. So remember what I'm saying. If you take a deed to be registered and you say the person whose name is on the deed as the grantor of the land is the parent of the person whose name is the grantee, and his name is on the certificate, and you don't have proof of the link between grantor and grantee, that is the one giving and the one receiving, they will say, fine, we'll register the deed for you, but you better pay 10% of the value of that land to get it registered. Whereas if you have the evidence of the linkage between the grantor as a parent of the grantee, and that evidence is clear on the face of the document, then they will say, fine, we'll register this deed for you. You don't have to pay any stamp duty. Mind you, there's a small fee called the registration charge, which you have to pay in any event. Anybody who goes to the registry to register any document has to pay the registration fee. But usually it's a few dollars. Seldom it goes above $100. So that if your father's name is not on your birth paper right now, but your father has a piece of land he wants to give to you, what should you do? Well, you go and make sure that your father's name is put on to your birth certificate. And 3 programs ago I explained to you how simple that is. Assuming your father and mother are alive and in St. Vincent, they just have to go to the registry. That is the one which is opposite the licensing office, near to Singer, with their ID cards and with your birth paper, present themselves as your parents, say they have come to put the father's name on your birth paper, pay a small fee, and in no time, your father's name is on your birth paper. Then once you have your birth paper with your father's name, then you could go back to the registry with a deed and say, haha, my father's giving me a piece of land and I don't want to have to pay the 10% stamp duty. And once they are sure that the certificate says what it says, fine. Now there are many fathers whose names are not on their children's birth certificate, who might have an extra piece of land which they want to give to a child, or go and put your name on the child's birth certificate and save yourself that 10% stamp duty. You see, some things are simple. They just take a bit of effort. Get up and get. If you're not sure and you remember Mr. Campbell had said so and so, go and ask a lawyer and get advice. Save yourself a lot of money. Now, let us assume that your father or mother has given you a piece of land. In the case of a mother, it is simple because your birth paper must have on your mother's name. So usually it isn't difficult for a woman to prove who her child is. Once you have a birth paper, it must have on a mother's name. So if the mother wants to give you a piece of land, the mother just has to go to the lawyer, present her title deed to the lawyer and say, look, I want to give this piece of land to my son or daughter, or I want to split this land and give part of it to my son or my daughter. That is done in a few days. But if it is a father and his name is not on the birth paper, by virtue of him not having been married to the mother when the child was born, that is where you have a problem. Excuse me. Now, assuming you have a deed of gift from a parent, or from both parents, it doesn't matter, and you then want to give it to one of your siblings, would that be possible? Can you give away a deed of gift? The answer is yes. But you cannot do that under 3 years of getting your deed of gift. Because if you get your deed of gift and you try to give it to anybody under 3 years, you have to pay 10% stamp duty. Even if the person is your child. So let us say a grandfather gives a parcel of land to his son. And let us say the son has his own son, which is the grandchild of the grandfather who originally gave the land. And the father, having got the piece of land from his father, says, look, I want to pass it on to my son. Can that be done? Yes, it can be done, but only when the father has had the land for 3 years. If you try to pass it on to your child before 3 years, you have to pay the stamp duty. Now, can you sell a parcel of land if you got it by deed of gift? The answer is yes. If you have your deed for a piece of land, it doesn't matter how you got the deed. Once it is valid and it is registered, it could be a deed of conveyance, it could be a deed of gift, it could be a deed of assent, it could be a deed of partition. Whatever deed it is, once it's a valid deed, you are free to do what you want with that piece of land, which is described in the deed, because it is yours. So don't let anybody tell you, oh boy, you can't sell that piece of land, because you get it by deed of gift. No. You can sell because it is yours. And what is yours you can dispose of, unless there are conditions prohibiting disposal. If you got property by deed of gift, can you leave it or part of it in a will for somebody else? Of course you can. Because again, it is yours. And once property is yours, you are free to leave it in a will. And remember, I've told you time and time again, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the law does not specify who you can leave something for in your will and who you can't, as in some other countries. In some other countries that have special laws, you can't just make a will and leave your property to whosoever you feel like. Because in those countries, the law says certain family members are entitled to get something out of your will, unless certain circumstances have occurred. So, for example, in Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, you can't just leave a will and say, oh, you leave in everything you have to 3 cousins and cut out your children from the will. They will have the right in those countries, after you've died, to go to court and challenge the will and say to the judge, the person who made this will is my father. He has given away all the property that he had to strangers, to distant relatives. We are his children, and he ought to have given something to us. And generally the court will agree with them and said yes, because the law insists in those countries that provisions have to be made for certain dependent relatives who are close by, wives and so on. You can't cut out your will out of those countries, in those countries. I've seen wills, at least one will in St. Vincent and Grenadines, where a man left his wife a glass of water And you may say, well, what went on? That is because under the old rules, the law says you had to leave something for your wife, even if it is a glass of water. But those old-time rules are out of our laws. So in closing, let me confirm that deeds of gift can be made generally between parents and children. In fact, they can be made between parents, cousins, uncles. Anybody could give anybody a deed of gift. But if it is not your child or your parent, you have to pay the 10% stamp duty. Husbands and wives do not have to pay stamp duty when they transfer property one to the other. But other relatives have to face the registry with their 10%. In the final analysis, if you are not sure what is the position, what do? You check out a lawyer to get legal advice and be guided by what the lawyer tells you. All right? All right, well, that is all from this program of the Law and You, program number 955. I look forward to being of further service to you next week, Monday, DV, for another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. Do have a pleasant week, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls. I see that the city has been becoming very busy, so I hope you have an exciting time as you prepare for Christmas. May the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.